Elowen's boots slipped on the wet stone as she climbed deeper into the ashfall caves. The lantern in her hand flickered, throwing jagged shadows across the walls. Behind her, somewhere in the darkness below, she heard it. Breathing. Heavy. Deliberate. He had found her. She pressed her back against the cold rock and killed the lantern's flame. Her chest heaved, each breath a betrayal in the silence. The blood test results were still crumpled in her pocket, the parchment that had ended her life 3 hours ago. Mate bond confirmed. Alpha bloodline match. Darius of the Ashfall Pact. The Alpha King. She had served in his Pact clinic for 2 years. 2 years of keeping her head down, mixing tinctures, stitching wounds, and never once looking him in the eye. She had known something was wrong. Known the way her skin prickled when he entered a room. Known the strange ache in her chest during full moons. But she had convinced herself it was fear. Respect. Anything but this. The bond had been dormant. Sleeping. And she had done everything in her power to keep it that way. Now the test had woken it. Footsteps echoed below. Slow. Patient. He wasn't running. He didn't need to. Elowen climbed higher, her fingers scraping against the damp stone. The caves twisted through the mountain like veins, and she knew them better than anyone. She had mapped them herself during her first winter here, when the loneliness had nearly broken her. She had told herself it was research. Medicine required knowing where the rare mosses grew, where the mineral springs pooled. She had never admitted she was mapping escape routes. The air grew colder as she reached the upper chamber. Moonlight filtered through a crack in the ceiling, illuminating a space no larger than her clinic. Dead end. She had known that when she chose it. She sat down against the far wall and waited. His shadow filled the entrance before he did. Darius ducked through the narrow opening, his broad shoulders brushing stone on both sides. In the pale light, his features looked carved from the mountain itself. Sharp jaw. Deep brown skin gleaming with exertion. His locks were pulled back from his face, and his eyes, those amber eyes that saw everything, found her immediately. Neither of them spoke. The bond hit her like a physical blow. It had been building for hours, ever since she'd read those results. Now, with him standing 10 feet away, it snapped into place with an almost audible crack. Her whole body trembled. Heat flooded her veins. She felt him. Not just his presence, but his heartbeat, his breath, the controlled fury radiating from his chest. He felt it too. She saw it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands curled into fists at his sides. 3 weeks? His voice was low, rough. You've been hiding from me for 3 weeks. Elowen didn't deny it. There was no point. He had tracked her here by scent alone. By the blood that now marked her as his, whether she wanted it or not. You knew. He stepped closer. You knew what was happening between us and you ran. I had to. Had to. He laughed, but there was no warmth in it. You're my healer. You serve this pack. And you had to run from your alpha? From my mate, the word felt forbidden on her tongue. Yes? Something flickered in his expression. Pain, maybe. Or betrayal. She couldn't tell. The bond was too new, too raw. It gave her his emotions in fragments, sharp edges without context. Why? She could have lied. Could have told him she didn't want him. That the bond was a mistake. But she had spent her whole life lying, and she was tired. So tired. Because claiming me will start a war. Darius went still. Absolutely still. The kind of stillness that came before violence. Explain. Elowen pulled the crumpled parchment from her pocket and held it toward him. Not the test results. The other document. The one she had found in her father's study the day she'd fled. The one that had made running the only option. He crossed the remaining distance between them in 3 strides and snatched the paper from her hand. She watched his eyes move across the text. Watched his expression darken with each line. A blood pact. His voice was barely human. Your father made a blood pact. 17 years ago, her throat felt raw. I was 8 years old. He traded my eventual mating rights to Alpha Kendrick of the Ironwood Pact in exchange for the Eastern Territory. The river access. The hunting grounds. She swallowed. If any Alpha claims me before Kendrick does, the Pact triggers a war clause. Kendrick gets to challenge for all of Ashfall's northern border. And he'll win, Darius. His pack is twice our size. Darius stared at her. The parchment crumpled in his grip. You were a child. I know. You had no say in this. I know. And your father. He stopped. Breathed. She felt his rage through the bond like fire licking at her skin. Your father sold you like livestock. Elowen didn't flinch. She had already spent her tears on that truth. He thought he was being clever, securing the Pact's future. He never expected me to manifest a mate bond, let alone one to, she gestured at him. At everything he was. Alpha King. Ashfall's heart. The man whose very existence now threatened to tear her world apart. So you chose exile. I chose to protect you, her voice cracked. If I disappear, the bond stays dormant. It fades eventually. You find another Luna. Kendrick never learns what I am to you, and the Pact stays inactive. And you spend the rest of your life hiding in caves. If that's what it takes. Darius moved before she could react. One moment he was standing above her. The next, his hands were braced against the wall on either side of her head, his face inches from hers. The bond roared between them. She felt his heartbeat like it was her own. You think I would let you rot in darkness to save myself from a fight? I think you're the Alpha King, her voice wavered. I think your pack comes first. I think you'd sacrifice anything for them. Even a mate you never wanted. His eyes burned into hers. Never wanted? You didn't know. You couldn't have. I knew. The words cut through her like a blade. I knew something was different the first time you walked into my territory. I felt it every time you were in the same room. Every time you kept your eyes on the floor instead of looking at me. His hand moved to her jaw, tilting her face up. I told myself it was nothing. That I was imagining things. That my healer, my quiet, careful healer, couldn't possibly be meant for me. Elowen's breath caught. 3 weeks ago, I felt the bond shift. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I didn't understand what it meant. But you did. You ran the same night. Because now, it's real. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. Now Kendrick will feel it too. The pact is tied to my blood. The moment you mark me, he'll know. And he'll come. Let him come. Darius. No. His grip tightened. Not painful. Possessive. You don't get to make this choice alone. Not anymore. That pact was made without your consent. Without your knowledge. You were a child, Elowen. A child your father traded away for land. It doesn't matter what I was. It matters what the law says. Then we challenged the law. He pulled back just enough to look at her fully. You're coming back to the compound with me. Tonight, we'll find another way. There is no other way. There's always another way, he held out his hand. My healer. My mate. Come home. The bond pulsed between them. Warm. Insistent. It wanted her to take his hand. To stop fighting. To finally rest. She thought of the caves. The darkness. The years stretching ahead of her, alone and cold and safe. She thought of her father's signature on that parchment. the way he had written her future in ink before she could even read. She thought of Darius, the way he had tracked her through mountains, the way he was looking at her now, not with pity but with fire, with certainty. Her hand shook as she placed it in his. If this destroys everything, then we rebuild. His fingers closed around hers. Together. The descent took longer than the climb. Elowen's legs trembled with each step, but Darius never let go of her hand. His grip was steady, warm, anchoring her to a reality she had spent weeks trying to escape. The bond hummed between them now. Not the sharp, desperate pulse from the upper chamber, but something deeper. Settled, like a river finding its course after a flood. She hated how right it felt. The cave mouth opened onto a narrow ridge overlooking the Ashfall Valley. Moonlight painted the treetops silver, and far below she could see the compound's torches flickering like scattered stars. Home. A word she had trained herself to forget. Darius stopped at the edge, his eyes scanning the darkness below. Micah has runners posted at the eastern border. If Kendrick's scouts are watching, they'll know I left the compound tonight. They're always watching. Elowen pulled her cloak tighter against the mountain wind. Kendrick has had eyes on Ashfall since the pact was signed. He's been waiting for this. For me to surface. For a reason to strike. Then we don't give him time to prepare. Darius turned to face her. In the moonlight, his features held an edge she rarely saw. Not cruelty. Strategy. We get to the compound. We confirm the pact's terms with Micah. And we find the weakness in the language before dawn. There is no weakness. My father made sure of that. Bitterness crept into her voice. He may have sold me, but he did it thoroughly. Every pact has gaps. His hand found her jaw again, tilting her face toward his. And I didn't become Alpha King by accepting impossible situations. She wanted to believe him. The bond wanted her to believe him. It flooded her with his certainty, his determination, his absolute refusal to let her go. But she had read that parchment 100 times in the weeks since finding it. She knew every word, every clause, every trap her father had laid. Darius, she forced herself to meet his eyes. If we can't find a way out, if the pact holds and Kendrick comes, then I fight. You could lose everything. I could. He brushed his thumb across her cheekbone. But I won't lose you. Not to a treaty. Not to a man who thinks he can own what the moon herself decided was mine. The words hit her like a fist to the chest. She had never belonged to anyone. Her father had made her a commodity. Her pack had seen her as useful. And she had spent so long making herself small, invisible, forgettable, that she had forgotten what it felt like to be wanted. Darius wanted her. The bond told her that much. But more than that, he was willing to risk his kingdom to keep her. It terrified her. And some small, starving part of her soul that she had buried years ago. It sang. The journey down the mountain passed in silence. Darius moved ahead, clearing the steeper drops before reaching back for her hand. She could have told him she knew this terrain. Could have reminded him she had mapped every trail, every handhold, every hidden path. But she didn't. She let him guide her. Let herself lean into the bond's pull just enough to keep moving. They reached the valley floor as the moon began its descent toward the western peaks. The compound gates loomed ahead, massive wooden structures reinforced with iron, guarded by 2 wolves who straightened immediately at Darius's approach. Alpha, the taller one, dipped his head. His eyes slid to Elowen, widened, and snapped back to Darius. The healer. We thought she had gone to the southern clinics. She's back. Darius's voice left no room for questions. Send for Micah. War room. Now. The guard sprinted into the compound. Elowen felt the weight of dozens of eyes as they crossed the central courtyard. Pack members gathered near the fire pits fell silent. Whispers chased her footsteps. She's back. Why was she gone? Look at the way he's holding her hand. The bond mark wasn't visible yet, but they were wolves. They could smell the shift between her and Darius, could sense the connection humming in the air like a live wire. Pause. Long by morning, the entire pack would know their healer was the Alpha's mate. By nightfall, Kendrick would know too. The war room occupied the compound's eastern wing, a stone chamber with maps covering every wall and a table large enough to seat 30. Tonight, only 3 chairs would be needed. Micah was already waiting when they arrived. The beta stood near the fire, his lean frame silhouetted against the flames. His warm brown skin caught the light as he turned, and Elowen saw the exact moment understanding crossed his features. The bond manifested. His voice was flat, not accusing, just stating fact. 3 weeks ago, Darius released Elowen's hand, only to pull out a chair for her. She sank into it, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. She ran. I found her, and now we deal with what comes next. Micah's eyes moved to Elowen. She had always respected him. He was clever, careful, and completely loyal to Darius. But she had also avoided him whenever possible. He saw too much. The blood pact, it wasn't a question. You know about it. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. I know Jabari made deals with Ironwood 17 years ago. I know those deals involved future concessions. Micah moved to the table and spread a scroll across its surface, a map of the Northern Territories, Ironwood's borders marked in red. I didn't know his daughter was one of them. Neither did I. The admission cost her more than she wanted to show. Not until 3 weeks ago. Darius placed the crumpled parchment beside the map. Micah picked it up, his eyes scanning the text with the practiced speed of someone who had read 1,000 treaties. The silence stretched. Elowen watched his expression shift from focus to calculation to something that looked dangerously close to grim respect. Your father is many things. Micah set the parchment down. But he's not a fool. This pact is airtight. The war clause triggers automatically upon any claiming mark from an alpha other than Kendrick. No exceptions. No delays. The moment Darius marks you, Ironwood has legal grounds to challenge for our northern border. I told him. Elowen's hands nodded in her lap. I told him there was no way out. There's always a way out. Darius braced his hands on the table. What about consent? She was a child. She never agreed to this. Consent wasn't required. Micah's voice held no satisfaction. Only truth. Blood pacts between pacts don't require the individual's agreement. They require the bloodlines. Jabari was Elowen's legal guardian. His signature bound her future to the terms. That's barbaric. That's the law, Micah straightened. Old law. Rarely invoked, but valid. Elowen closed her eyes. She had known this, had spent 3 weeks in the caves accepting it. But hearing it confirmed by someone other than her own desperate thoughts made it real in a way it hadn't been before. She was property. Had been property since she was 8 years old. And now the man she was bound to was going to risk everything to claim her anyway. What about challenge rights? Darius's voice had dropped into the register that made other alphas flinch. If Kendrick wants her, he can fight me for her. He could. Micah pulled another scroll from the shelf behind him. But the pact specifically addresses this. A challenge only applies after the claiming is complete. If you mark her, he can challenge for the border. If you don't mark her, she remains unclaimed and the pact stays dormant. So my choices are lose her or lose my territory. Your choice is to find another way, Micah set the second scroll on the table. And I might have one. There's an older law. Predates the pact system entirely. The law of mate's consent. Elowen's eyes snapped open. It states that any agreement regarding mating rights can be nullified if the individual in question was never informed of the terms and publicly refuses them. Micah's gaze moved between them. The catch is that the refusal must happen before any claiming takes place, and it must happen in front of witnesses from both pacts. You want me to refuse the pact? Elowen's pulse quickened. In front of Kendrick. In front of everyone, Micah nodded. If you declare yourself unknowing and unwilling, the pact becomes void. Kendrick loses his claim. And Darius can mark you without triggering the war clause. If it works. If it works. The door slammed open. A runner stumbled in, chest heaving. Alpha, the young wolf's eyes were wild. Rider at the eastern gate. Ironwood colors. He's demanding to see you. Darius straightened slowly. The bond flooded Elowen with his fury, controlled, banked, but blazing beneath the surface. Kendrick moves fast. He's been waiting 17 years. Micah's voice was grim. He can afford speed now. Darius turned to Elowen. His hand found hers again, and the bond steadied between them. Stay here. Whatever happens next, stay here until I come for you. Darius, promise me. She looked into his eyes, saw the alpha, saw the man, saw the mate who had tracked her through darkness to bring her home. I promise. He released her hand and strode toward the door. Micah followed. And Elowen sat alone in the war room, watching the fire burn, waiting for the reckoning she had spent her whole life trying to escape. The fire had burned low by the time footsteps echoed in the corridor again. Elowen rose from her chair, her legs stiff from hours of waiting. The bond had been feeding her fragments all night, Darius's anger, his focus, his iron control as he faced whatever waited at the eastern gate. She had felt the moment his fury peaked, had felt it slowly bank into something colder, more dangerous. Now he stood in the doorway, and she knew before he spoke. Kendrick is here. The words left her lips first. Not Kendrick himself. Darius crossed the room, his movements tight with restrained violence. His herald. A man named Graves. He brought formal demands. Micah entered behind him, carrying a sealed scroll. The wax bore the ironwood crest, a twisted oak struck by lightning. Elowen had seen that symbol in her nightmares for weeks. What does he want? She already knew the answer. You. Darius took the scroll from Micah and set it on the table between them. Or the territory my father promised his father 17 years ago. His choice. The words hung in the air. Elowen felt them settle into her bones like frost. He's invoking the pact. He's invoking everything. Micah moved to the map, his finger tracing the northern border. The original terms gave Kendrick claim to the eastern hunting grounds if the mating never occurred. But the war clause. He tapped a section of forest marked in dark green. The war clause gives him grounds to challenge for all of this. The river access. The mountain passes. The caves. The caves. Where she had hidden. Where Darius had found her. He knew. Her voice came out hollow. He knew I was there. His scouts tracked you 3 days into your disappearance. Darius's jaw tightened. They've been watching the mountain ever since. Waiting to see if you'd surface. Waiting to see if I'd come after you. And you did. I did. No regret in his tone. Only certainty. Elowen sank back into her chair. The bond pulsed between them. His determination, her fear, both tangled together until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. The herald. She forced herself to focus. What did you tell him? I told him the pact was void. Darius braced his hands on the table, leaning toward her. I told him Elowen was never informed of the terms. Never consulted. Never given a choice. By the law of mate's consent, the agreement has no standing. And? And Graves laughed. Micah's voice was flat. He said Kendrick anticipated that argument. He's demanding a formal hearing. Both Pacts present. You must declare your refusal publicly, and Kendrick must witness it. He won't accept it. No, Darius straightened. He won't. Which is why he's also issued a formal challenge. If the consent law fails to void the pact, he'll fight me at dawn for the right to claim you himself. The room tilted. Elowen gripped the edge of the table. He can't. He can, Micah's tone held no comfort. The challenge is legal. If the pact stands, and Darius marks you, Kendrick can challenge for territory. But if Kendrick wins the challenge before any marking occurs, he can invoke the original terms and take you as his Luna by right of conquest. By force. The words tasted like ash. The old laws don't distinguish between willing and unwilling. Micah met her eyes. They only recognize blood. And your blood was promised to Ironwood before you understood what blood meant. Silence fell over the war room. The fire crackled. Outside, Elowen could hear the compound stirring. Wolves who had sensed the tension, who knew something was coming, who whispered her name in the darkness. Where is Kendrick now? She didn't want to know. Had to know. Camped at the eastern border. Darius moved around the table until he stood beside her. His hand found her shoulder. Not possessive this time, but grounding. He brought 50 wolves. More than enough for a formal challenge escort. Not enough for a full assault. He's confident. He's arrogant. The correction came with a flash of teeth. He thinks 17 years of waiting entitles him to what he wants. He doesn't understand that some things can't be bought or bargained. Elowen looked up at him. The bond showed her what his words didn't, the tension beneath the certainty. Not fear of Kendrick. Not fear of losing territory or status or power. Fear of losing her. If you fight him, she had to say it, had to make him understand. If you fight him and lose, I won't lose. But if you do, she stood, facing him fully, I become his. Not just his claim. His property. He'll mark me before sunset and there won't be a law in existence that can undo it. Then I won't lose. His hands cupped her face. I fought challengers before, Elowen. I've held this territory against 5 alphas who thought they could take it. Kendrick is strong. But he's never faced someone fighting for their mate. The word hit her like it always did. Mate. She had spent so long running from it. So long pretending it was a curse instead of a gift. I need to see him. The decision crystallized before she finished speaking. Before dawn. Before the challenge. I need to face Kendrick myself. Absolutely not. He's been hunting me for 17 years, she held Darius's gaze. He's had scouts watching my movements, tracking my scent, waiting for the moment I became valuable enough to claim. I've been a piece on his board since I was a child. I refuse to let him move me again without looking him in the eye. Darius's grip tightened on her face. The bond surged with his resistance, protective, primal, desperate to keep her safe from every threat. He'll try to intimidate you. Let him try. He'll use the pact against you. Try to convince you that surrendering is easier than fighting. I've spent 3 weeks in a cave convincing myself the same thing. She placed her hands over his. I was wrong. Running didn't save anyone. It only delayed the inevitable. If I'm going to stand in front of both pacts tomorrow and declare myself free of that pact, I need to face the man who thinks he owns me first. The struggle played across his features. She felt it through the bond, his alpha instincts screaming at him to refuse, to protect, to shield her from every danger. But beneath that, something else. Respect. Recognition. She wasn't asking permission. She was telling him what she needed. Micah. Darius didn't look away from her. Send word to the Ironwood camp? Elowen will meet with Kendrick at the border. Neutral ground. 1 hour. Alpha. Do it. The beta hesitated only a moment before nodding and disappearing through the door. Darius released her face but didn't step back. I'm coming with you. I know. If he touches you, then you'll have your challenge early. She managed a smile that felt sharp at the edges. But he won't. Not yet. He wants the spectacle. He wants to win me in front of witnesses. A private claim would satisfy his pride, but a public victory would satisfy his ambition. You understand him. I've had 17 years to study the cage he built for me. She turned toward the door. It's time he learned I've been studying how to break it. The border meeting ground sat in a clearing where Ashfall's pines gave way to Ironwood's twisted oaks. Torches had been driven into the earth at even intervals, their flames casting dancing shadows across the frost-bitten grass. Elowen counted 12 ironwood wolves, forming a loose semicircle behind their alpha. Kendrick stood at the center, arms crossed, waiting. He was exactly as she remembered from the few glimpses she'd caught over the years. Tall, broad-shouldered. His dark skin gleamed in the torchlight, and his eyes, cold, calculating, patient, found her the moment she stepped into the clearing. A smile curved his lips. Not warm. Proprietary. Little healer, his voice carried across the space between them. You finally stopped running. Elowen felt Darius tense beside her. The bond flooded with his barely leashed fury. She placed her hand on his arm, a silent request. Let me handle this. Alpha Kendrick. She stopped 3 paces from the invisible line that marked neutral ground. I've come to discuss the terms of a pact I never agreed to. There's nothing to discuss. Kendrick uncrossed his arms, spreading his hands in a gesture of false welcome. The terms were set before you could walk. Your father's signature bound your bloodline to mine. All that remains is the claiming. And if I refuse? His smile widened. You can't refuse what was never yours to decide. The words hit exactly where he intended. Elowen felt their impact, the reminder that she had been property since childhood, that her choices meant nothing against the weight of ink and blood. But she had spent 3 weeks in darkness, preparing for this moment. She had mapped every argument, every weakness, every crack in the cage he'd built around her future. The law of mate's consent disagrees. She kept her voice steady. I was never informed of the pact's existence, never consulted on its terms, never given the opportunity to accept or refuse. By ancient law, any agreement made without the individual's knowledge can be nullified by public declaration. Kendrick's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in his eyes. Interest, maybe. Or amusement at her audacity. You've done your research. I've had 17 years to prepare. He laughed, a low, rumbling sound that made the wolves behind him shift with anticipation. Your father told me you were clever. Said you'd inherited your mother's stubbornness along with her gift for healing. He stepped closer to the invisible line, close enough that she could smell him now. Pine smoke and iron. He also told me you'd fight. He said when the time came you'd need to be broken before you'd submit. The bond screamed. Darius moved before Elowen could stop him, placing himself between her and Kendrick in a single fluid motion. One more step. His voice had dropped into something barely human. One more word about breaking her. Give me a reason. Kendrick's gaze moved to Darius with lazy contempt. The Alpha King himself. I wondered if you'd let her speak for herself or if you'd prove my point. What point? That she's already yours to protect, to control, to command. Kendrick's eyes flicked back to Elowen. You've traded one cage for another, little healer. The only difference is this one has a prettier lock. I'm no one's cage. Darius's hands curled into fists. And she's no one's property. The Pact says otherwise. The Pact was made without her consent. Consent is a luxury. Blood is law. Kendrick spread his hands again, addressing the wolves on both sides. Your father understood this, Darius. He built Ashfall on blood pacts and territorial agreements. He understood that sometimes the needs of the pack outweigh the desires of the individual. His gaze returned to Elowen. Your father understood it too. He gave you to me to secure his family's position, to guarantee his bloodline a place in the new order. He was thinking of the future. Your future. My father sold me. The words came out sharper than she intended. He traded my life for river access and hunting grounds. That's not thinking of the future. That's thinking of himself. Something flickered across Kendrick's face. Not shame. Recognition. He had expected her to defend Jabari, to cling to the fiction that her father had acted out of love rather than ambition. Your father made a strategic decision. His tone shifted, harder now, less amused. One that benefited everyone. Ironwood gains a healer with royal bloodline potential. Ashfall gains security. And you, he stepped right up to the invisible line. You gain a place of honor at my side. Luna of the largest pack in the Northern Territories. Mother to the next generation of alphas. Is that really so terrible? It's a cage. Elowen stepped forward, matching him. The bond pulsed with Darius's alarm, but she didn't retreat. A gilded cage is still a prison. You're not offering me a partnership. You're offering me a collar with a finer chain. Kendrick's jaw tightened. The pretense of charm cracked for just a moment, revealing the calculation beneath. You have until dawn to reconsider. His voice had lost its warmth entirely. Declare yourself willing, and we avoid bloodshed. Refuse, and I'll take what's mine by right of challenge. His eyes moved to Darius. Your alpha may be strong, but he's never faced someone who's been preparing for this fight for 17 years. Neither have you, Elowen held his gaze. You've been preparing to claim a girl who didn't know she was being hunted. A woman who would come to you broken and grateful. Instead, you're facing someone who knows exactly what you are and refuses to kneel. Silence stretched between them. The torches crackled. The wolves on both sides watched with predatory stillness. Kendrick smiled again, but this time there was no pretense in it. Only hunger. Dawn, then? He stepped back from the line. I look forward to watching you realize what you've thrown away. He turned and walked into the darkness. His wolves followed, their torches extinguishing one by one, until only Ashfall's flames remained. Elowen let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. You provoked him. Darius's voice was tight. Deliberately. I needed to see if there was anything left to negotiate. She turned to face him. There isn't. He doesn't want a mate. He wants a trophy. A symbol of his victory over Ashfall. Over you. I could have told you that. But now I know it myself. She placed her hand over his heart. The bond thrummed between them, steadier than before. And I know something else. He's afraid? Darius's eyebrows rose. He spent 17 years building this moment in his head. Elowen kept her voice low enough that only he could hear. The triumphant claiming. The broken healer falling at his feet. Instead, he got defiance. He got you standing between us like a wall he can't breach. And he got a woman who looked him in the eye and called his cage exactly what it is. She smiled grimly. He's not afraid of losing the challenge. He's afraid of what it means if he wins and I still refuse to break. Darius studied her face in the torchlight. The bond showed her his thoughts shifting, anger giving way to something deeper. Pride. Recognition. And beneath it all, the steady pulse of a connection she was only beginning to understand. We need to prepare. His hand covered hers where it rested on his chest. And we need to find your father. The name landed like a stone in still water. Jabari. He arrives at the compound within the hour. Micah's voice came from behind them. The beta had kept his distance during the meeting, but his hearing missed nothing. He's asking to speak with you. Privately. Elowen's stomach turned. She had known this moment would come, had dreaded it since the night she'd found the pact in his study. Then, let's not keep him waiting. She released Darius's hand and turned toward the path home. It's time my father learned what his strategic decisions have cost him. The compound gates stood open when they returned. Torches lined the main pathway, and wolves had gathered in clusters near the great hall. Too many for this hour, their faces turned toward the eastern wing, where the elders held council. Elowen spotted him before they reached the steps. Jabari stood beneath the hall's stone archway, his graying locks pulled back from a face she had once trusted completely. He wore his elder's robes, the silver threading catching firelight, and his posture held the rigid dignity of a man who believed himself above reproach. His warm brown skin showed new lines around his eyes, but his expression, that was the same. Calculating. Careful. The face of a man who had spent his life playing games with other people's futures. Her father. The man who had sold her. Elowen. His voice carried across the courtyard, pitched to sound relieved. Fatherly. Thank the moon you're safe. When I heard you'd disappeared. Don't? She stopped 3 paces from him. The bond pulsed with Darius's presence at her shoulder, steady and watchful. Don't pretend you were worried about my safety. You've known exactly where I was for 17 years. You've known what would happen the moment Darius found me. Jabari's expression flickered. Not guilt. Recalculation. You found the pact. I found everything. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. The blood agreement. The territory exchange. The clause that triggers war if any Alpha claims me before Kendrick. She stepped closer, and for the first time in her life, she saw her father take a step back. I was 8 years old. You signed away my future while I was learning to read. I was protecting this family. His voice hardened. You don't understand the position we were in. Ironwood was expanding. Ashfall was weak. If I hadn't secured that alliance. Alliance? The word came out sharp enough to cut. You call trading your daughter an alliance? I call it survival. Jabari's chin lifted. Your mother was dying. The pack healers couldn't save her. Kendrick's father offered access to Ironwood's medicine stores in exchange for future considerations. I did what I had to do. The revelation struck her like a physical blow. She had spent 3 weeks in the caves, imagining every possible justification, every excuse, every twisted logic her father might have used to convince himself his actions were noble. She had never imagined this. Mother's illness. Her voice came out hollow. You used her death to bargain away my life? I used her death to save yours. Something shifted in Jabari's expression, not remorse, but the echo of old grief. You were too young to remember how sick you were that winter. The same fever that took her was killing you. Ironwood's healers had medicines we couldn't access. Kendrick's father agreed to send them, for a price. Elowen's legs threatened to give way. The bond flooded with Darius's fury, not at the revelation, but at the way Jabari delivered it. Like a chess move. Like a strategy designed to make her sympathize. You never told me. The words scraped her throat raw. 25 years. You never once thought I deserved to know why I owed my life to a pack that planned to own me? Would it have changed anything? Jabari spread his hands. You would have grown up afraid. Resentful, unable to live freely knowing what waited at the end. I gave you 25 years of peace, Elowen. 25 years of believing your future was your own. My future was never my own. She felt Darius's hand on her shoulder, grounding, steadying. You made sure of that. And worse. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. You knew about the mate bond, didn't you? Silence. The pack gatherings. She watched his face for any crack in the mask. You always made excuses for why I couldn't attend. Said you needed me in the clinic. Said there were patients who couldn't wait. But that wasn't why, was it? Elowen. You knew. Her voice rose. Wolves in the courtyard turned to watch. You knew I might manifest a bond to Darius. You knew it would void the pact. So you kept me away from him for years. Kept me invisible. Made sure we never spent enough time in the same space for the bond to wake up. Jabari's mask cracked. Just for an instant. But it was enough. I was protecting the agreement. His voice dropped to a hiss. The pact guaranteed our family's standing. Your bond to an Alpha King meant nothing if it destroyed everything I'd built. Everything you'd built. Darius spoke for the first time, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. You built nothing, Jabari. You traded your daughter's freedom for political security. You sabotaged her bond to her own alpha to preserve a deal that benefited no one but yourself. This doesn't concern you. She's my mate. Darius stepped forward until he stood shoulder to shoulder with Elowen. Everything about her concerns me, including the father who spent decades manipulating her life to serve his ambitions. Jabari's eyes narrowed. For a moment, Elowen saw the man her father might have been, sharp, dangerous, willing to fight for what he believed was his. But then his gaze moved to the wolves gathering in the courtyard, to the elders watching from the hall steps, to the weight of judgment pressing in from all sides. He was outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and for the first time in his life he couldn't bargain his way free. The pact is still valid. His voice held an edge of desperation. Whatever you think you know, whatever you believe you can prove, Kendrick has legal claim. If you challenge him, you'll lose territory. If you claim her without challenge, you'll start a war. The pact requires my consent. Elowen stepped forward, and this time her father didn't step back. I was never given consent. I was never informed. By the law of mate's consent, any agreement made without my knowledge can be nullified. That law hasn't been invoked in 3 generations. Then we'll be the first. She held his gaze. At dawn, I will stand before both pacts and declare the truth. I was sold as a child, without my knowledge. I was kept ignorant of my own fate by a father who valued political standing over his daughter's freedom. And I will choose my own mate, my own future, my own path. Jabari's face drained of color. You'll destroy everything, his voice cracked. Everything I sacrificed, everything I built for this family. You destroyed it yourself. Elowen felt tears burning at her eyes but refused to let them fall. The moment you signed that pact, you chose power over your daughter. Now live with what follows. She turned to Darius. The bond hummed between them. Grief and resolve tangled together until she couldn't separate them. Do it. He understood immediately. His voice rang across the courtyard, carrying to every wolf who had gathered to witness. Jabari, of the Ashfall Pact. Darius's authority settled over the space like a physical weight. By the power vested in me as Alpha King, I strip you of your elder rank. Your seat on the council is forfeit. Your voice in Pact matters is silenced. You will hold no position of authority in Ashfall until such time as the Pact deems you worthy of trust again. The words landed like hammer blows. Elowen watched her father's face crumble. Not with remorse, but with the realization that everything he had schemed for, everything he had sacrificed her future to protect, was gone. You can't, Jabari started. I just did. Darius gestured to the guards flanking the hall entrance. Escort him to the holding quarters. He'll remain there until after the challenge. The guards moved forward. Jabari's eyes found Elowen one last time, searching for mercy, for weakness, for any crack in her resolve that he could exploit. She gave him nothing. He was led away in silence. The courtyard remained still, every wolf frozen in the weight of what they had witnessed. An elder stripped of rank, a father exposed, a daughter finally free of the chains she hadn't known she was wearing. Elowen turned toward the eastern horizon, where dawn was still hours away. Somewhere beyond those hills, Kendrick waited, prepared, certain of his victory. He had no idea what was coming. The hours before dawn passed like water through her fingers. Elowen stood at the window of Darius's private quarters, watching the sky shift from black to deep blue. The compound below was quiet, but she could feel the tension humming through the bond, the pack holding its breath, waiting for the confrontation that would reshape their world. Darius moved behind her, his footsteps soft on the stone floor. His hands found her shoulders, and she leaned back into his warmth without thinking. You should rest. I can't. She placed her hands over his. Every time I close my eyes, I see Kendrick's face. I see my father's. I see 17 years of lies unraveling at once. Then don't close your eyes. He turned her to face him. In the pre-dawn light, his features were soft, his amber eyes holding none of the fury she had seen at the border. Only warmth. Only certainty. Stay here with me. The bond pulsed between them. Steady now, settled in a way it hadn't been before. She had spent so long running from this feeling. So long convinced that wanting him would destroy everything. But standing here, in the quiet before the storm, she understood something she had been too afraid to admit. He wasn't her prison. He was her choice. When this is over, she reached up to touch his face. When Kendrick is dealt with and the pact is void, what happens then? Then we rebuild. His hand covered hers. Together. You keep saying that. Because I mean it. He drew her closer, his forehead resting against hers. I've spent 2 years watching you from across rooms, telling myself I was imagining the pull between us. I'm done pretending. I'm done waiting for permission to want what the moon herself decided was mine. The words settled into her chest like embers catching fire. I'm not easy. The warning came out softer than she intended. I'm stubborn. I question everything. I've spent my whole life trusting no one, and I don't know how to stop. I'm not asking you to stop. His lips brushed her forehead. I'm asking you to let me earn it, every day. For as long as you'll let me. She closed her eyes. The bond sang between them. Not demanding, not consuming, but steady. Patient. Like a heartbeat waiting for an answer. At dawn. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. Whatever happens at dawn, I want you to know. I'm not running anymore. Whatever comes next, I choose this. I choose you. His smile was slow. Certain. The smile of a man who had finally heard the words he had been waiting for. Then let's go end this. The challenge ground had been transformed overnight. Torches ringed the clearing in a blazing circle, their flames casting sharp shadows across the frost-covered grass. Wolves from both packs had gathered at the edges. Ashfall to the west, ironwood to the east, their breaths misting in the cold air as they waited for blood to settle what words could not. Elowen stood at the northern point of the circle, her position marking her as the contested prize. But she didn't feel like a prize anymore. She felt like a weapon. One that Kendrick had never expected to turn against him. The Ironwood Alpha emerged from the tree line as the first rays of dawn broke over the mountains. 50 wolves flanked him, their formations tight, their eyes hungry. Kendrick himself walked at the center, stripped down to fighting leathers, his dark skin gleaming with oil, meant to make him harder to grip. He looked at Elowen first. Not at Darius. At her. She held his gaze without flinching. Before the challenge begins. Micah's voice rang across the clearing. The beta stood at the circle's edge, scroll in hand. His role as witness giving him authority over the proceedings. The law of mate's consent must be invoked. Kendrick's lip curled. Get on with it then. Micah nodded to Elowen. She stepped forward into the circle, her heart pounding but her voice steady. I am Elowen, daughter of Jabari. The words carried across the silent clearing. 17 years ago, my father signed a blood pact with Ironwood without my knowledge. Without my consent. I was 8 years old when my mating rights were traded for territory. I learned of this pact only 3 weeks ago. Murmurs rippled through both packs. Elowen saw wolves exchanging glances, their expressions shifting from anticipation to unease. By the ancient law of mate's consent, I declare myself unknowing and unwilling. She lifted her chin. I refuse the pact. I refuse Kendrick's claim. And I claim my own future. Silence. Kendrick laughed. The sound was cold, dismissive. Words. He stepped into the circle, arms spread wide. Pretty words from a woman who thinks laws can save her from blood. His eyes found Darius, who stood at the circle's southern edge. But the law also provides a solution when consent is contested. Challenge by combat. Winner takes the claim. The claim was never yours to take. Darius moved into the circle. In the dawnlight, he looked like something carved from shadow and flame. But I'll fight you anyway. Because you've been hunting my mate for 17 years, and I've been waiting 3 weeks to make you bleed for it. Kendrick's smile sharpened. Then, let's begin. The fight was brutal, swift, decisive. Kendrick struck first, his movements honed by years of anticipation. He had studied Darius, learned his patterns, prepared for this exact confrontation. But he hadn't prepared for the bond. Elowen felt it the moment Darius took the first hit. A blow to the ribs that would have staggered a lesser wolf. She gasped, her hand flying to her own side. Through the bond, she felt his pain, his fury, his absolute refusal to fall. And she felt his strategy shift. Darius wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to outlast. Every blow he absorbed, every strike he deflected, he was waiting, watching, learning Kendrick's rhythm the way he had once learned the mountain trails. And when the opening came, he took it. Kendrick lunged. Darius moved. The Ironwood Alpha's fist connected with empty air, and Darius's elbow drove into the rostra, side of his skull with a crack that echoed across the clearing. Kendrick staggered. Darius didn't give him time to recover. 3 more blows, ribs, jaw, temple, each one landed with precision. Each one drove Kendrick further toward the ground. And when the Ironwood Alpha finally fell to his knees, blood streaming from his mouth, Darius stood over him like judgment made flesh. Yield. The word was not a request. Kendrick spat blood onto the frost-covered grass. His eyes found Elowen one last time, filled with rage, with disbelief, with the dawning understanding that everything he had waited for had just slipped through his fingers. I yield, the clearing erupted. Ashfall wolves howled their triumph. Ironwood wolves stood frozen, their alpha broken before them, their claim to Elowen's blood dissolved with 3 words. Elowen walked into the circle. The wolves parted for her without question. She stopped in front of Kendrick, looked down at the man who had haunted her nightmares, the man who had thought he owned her since childhood. You wanted a broken woman. Her voice was quiet, steady. You got a mate who chose her own future instead. She turned away from him, walked to Darius's side, took his hand in front of both Pacts, and when his fingers closed around hers, the bond blazed between them. Visible now, unmistakable, a connection that no pact could sever and no challenge could break. The sun rose over the mountains, golden light spilling across the clearing where everything had changed. Elowen stood with Darius as the Ironwood wolves retreated into the trees. Kendrick was carried by his own men, his defeat complete, his claim dissolved into nothing more than bitter memory. She breathed in the cold morning air, felt the bond humming steady in her chest, looked at the man beside her, the Alpha who had tracked her through mountains, who had faced down her demons, who had fought for her when she hadn't known how to fight for herself. It's over. The words felt strange on her tongue, light, free. It's beginning. Darius lifted her hand to his lips. Everything that comes next, that's ours to build. She smiled. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, it reached her eyes. Around them, Ashfall wolves gathered close. Their pack, their home, their future, finally unwritten by anyone but themselves. The dawn held them close, and nothing more needed to be said. If you believe betrayal should never go unanswered, subscribe and join us for what comes next.